Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Scott Brady, and I am here in beautiful Bozeman, Montana, with a very interesting individual, Wes Siler. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
A, you're very flattering, and B, it's been too long since I've seen you.
I know, it has been. And a special thanks to Rocky Talkies for their support of this week's podcast. Rocky Talkies are backcountry radios designed by a small team in Denver. The radios are extremely rugged, easy to use, and compact, weighing in at just under 8 ounces. They have a range of 1 to 5 miles in the mountains and up to 25 miles line of sight. The batteries will last from 3 to 5 days, and you can recharge them easily via USB-C right in the vehicle. Our team uses Rocky Talkies, and we also used them recently at the Overland Expo. The next Overland Expo, stop into our booth and say hello and check out the radios for yourself. And as a listener of the Overland Journal podcast, you can get 10% off a pair by going to rockytalkie.com/Overland Journal. Thanks again, Rocky Talkie. It's been fun to be back in Montana a lot more recently, and we were talking about just a few minutes ago. But what do you think is this draw to Montana right now?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, pandemic trends have accelerated moves to rural areas. But outside of that, I think the thing that attracts people to Montana is that there's real danger here. And whether that's winter weather, whether that's an avalanche, whether that's a grizzly bear, whether it's just the extremely low population density and the amount of trouble you can get in as a result without access to help. This is a place that attracts self-reliant people who want the ability to go out there and test themselves and do so without a whole lot of oversight. That attracts a broad swath of people from all spectrums of society.
So what's interesting to me is how you got from, if I remember, you grew up in South Carolina. Was that correct?
I'm from Georgia.
Georgia?
I was born in Georgia. My family's from North Carolina.
North Carolina.
I grew up mostly in England.
Okay.
My dad worked for the Department of Defense. And then I've lived in London and New York, Los Angeles, and now here as an adult.
So talk to me about that process that goes from growing up in the southeast of this country to where you decide, I want to move to Bozeman, and you want to have the adventurous life that you do now. What was the impetus for you becoming the Wes Siler that we know today?
Right. So I should point out first that I had nothing to do with moving to Bozeman. This is entirely the result of my lovely wife, Virginia. We met in Los Angeles. I think on our first date, she said, I'm not going to live in Los Angeles forever. And I was like, my kind of girl. And, we got serious and we were thinking about a lifestyle upgrade. I didn't grow up in this country. I've lived here since 2006. Yeah. I wasn't fully familiar with everything. And the places that I had a lot of fun outdoors and where I had existing friend groups and things like that felt right. It was the PNW. It was, Bend, Oregon, Ashland, Oregon, Seattle, and outside of Seattle. And that felt exciting for me. But Virginia was always kind of like, that's not quite enough. I never really understood that because I'd never been here. I'd never been to Montana. Got it. This to me was a blank space on a map that I was pretty convinced was South Dakota. And so as we were shopping for houses elsewhere in the country, she orchestrated a little vacation here. Got me drunk at dinner one night. We were walking back to the hotel and she's like, why don't we just move here to Bozeman? And I was like, really? There's one street. You could do this? And she was like, yeah. 4 months later, we had bought a house, moved up here.
Well, and you guys were right before the onslaught, literally, of people moving to Montana.
Oh, my God. I mean, our timing was very good. It was expensive back then, honestly. Yeah. And, it was a challenge. And once the pandemic hit, I mean, it's just been insane. Yeah. And my heart goes out to people that want to move here now because it's just there's no inventory for houses whatsoever. Yeah. The rental market is predatory. You can't buy a house for our money. It's nice to be here now. It's, as you saw, very crowded downtown with tourists.
It was, yeah.
We're also talking like we tend to concentrate our views of things into very small areas. And we say, oh my God, Bozeman's blown up and it's crazy. And, you drive 10 minutes in any direction and it's empty and there's nobody around as far as you can see.
Well,
it's still a really special area.
I was camped about 45 minutes away and I didn't hear another vehicle. I didn't see another vehicle. Yeah. I was perched up on top of this promontory overlooking the valley, and it was gorgeous, man. It's just gorgeous.
I hunt bears right where you camp.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, hey, that's a great segue because I'm really interested to understand what you have learned in the hunting space that you have brought with you to travel and to overlanding.
That's an interesting question. I should start with, honestly, kind of a neophyte hunter. I came into hunting as an adult. I've had some good mentors. Obviously, through work, I can have experiences and tutelage and access to products and gear that people couldn't, and that's helped speed me along. But at the same time, I'm not Steve Ranella.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just somebody who goes out. I really enjoy seeing animals. I've always loved animals, really fascinated with them. And that's really sort of spun into hunting. Hunting is seeking out, for me, is for seeking out the most challenging possible experiences outdoors.
Yeah.
And, trying to make things as challenging and difficult as possible and getting close to animals and gnarly as possible environments. And I really enjoy that. And there's definitely a parallel to how I travel, because the most interesting places in the world are all, obviously the most difficult to reach.
No doubt.
That are the most dangerous, that are, places that other people shy away from. Whenever I travel, I also try to take my love of the natural world into that, to try to see the animals that are there, to try to see the scenery and the places and learn about the plants and animals that exist in those unique environments.
And it's so interesting when we travel to the developing world, a lot of times there's very little animals left. They may have some reserved areas, but it isn't until you really get North America as an example of good wildlife management. But when I crossed Russia, I didn't see a single wild animal.
No, and you won't
12,000 miles.
No, you want many places.
Or 12,000 kilometers. It's just crazy.
America is so unique in that we have this exceptionally wonderful and successful wildlife management program. We take for granted, we drive everywhere in America, you see deer.
Yeah.
You drive out west, you see elk. We see bears when we go camping. All that stuff that does not exist in the rest of the world, nor does access to it. Anybody can go hunting in America of any income level. It's accessible to everybody. And in fact, it's still a way that, millions of low income families put healthy protein on their tables every year. That doesn't exist in Mexico. That doesn't exist in Europe.
Yeah.
In Europe, hunting's only accessible to the very rich. It takes place all on private land. It's mostly, pinned and released animals or cultivated, raised animals. We are so lucky to have this. And I feel like we take it for granted.
One of the things that I'm interested in is you've had such a variety of outdoor experience all around the world. Mm-hmm. You traveling with a vehicle up to recent years has been just a tool to get the job done.
Yeah.
And now you're enjoying more of the recreating with vehicles. What do you think overlanding is doing right? And what do you think it's doing wrong?
That's a good question. The overall trend of empowering people to get more from their vehicles and get more from the general experience of the outdoors is very good. I was talking this weekend with my friend Connor, who lives around the corner, and Connor is a successful, well-educated person who drives a stock 4Runner. It's his first 4x4. He's never really driven off-road before, and he has no idea how much is out there. So I'm always encouraging him to go a little further with his car. I'm like, hey man, you should get suspension, you need recovery equipment, you should grab Max Trax, that kind of thing. And he's always like, why? And then we invariably go on a camping or hunting trip together. And he's like, I did not know this was here. And you're like, there's so much of this. It's just everywhere. And so many people don't get to take advantage of it. And so overlanding as a trend or a movement or activity is really positive. And that's helping people get more from their vehicles and understand that there's so much stuff out there to do. At its worst, it's just another fetish, like, bolting big giant wings to the back of front wheel drive cars was in the early 2000s. You and I and the other stakeholders in this world and the other people that are influential in this world really need to come together and find ways to make it so it's not a big wing, where it's actually empowering and helpful and a really cool thing.
Yeah, quality, functional, safe.
Safety is
a lot of people are overloading their vehicles. You and I have talked about that a lot.
So. I had a really good phone call with REI recently. And REI is delving deeper into the overland space. They mostly see it as crossovers and that kind of thing. What you and I would probably traditionally describe as car camping. It's not long distance international travel, but it's people going outdoors and sort of equipping their vehicles to be better. Yeah. And I was like, well, hey, if you guys are going to reach this giant audience that you have captive already, the most important thing you can do is deliver a safety message. And part of that's navigation, part of that's preparedness, and part of that is, responsible use of the trails and the vehicles. And so we see that in payloads. Driving around town, here in Bozeman, Montana, driving past my front window, sometime in the next 30 seconds will be a Subaru Outback that is so far beyond payload that it's comical. Yeah. That person invariably at some point is going to think they have a legit off-road vehicle, get it up a dirt road or get it in the snow, get it stuck, and have no idea what to do from that point. Yeah. And just outside of town here, you could spend 20 minutes driving and be, 15 miles deep into grizzly bear territory without water, without bear spray, without any effective tools. Have your Outback, your overladen Outback high centered, have no straps, have no Max Trax, have no shovel on board,
Yeah.
And what do you do? And so at its worst, overlanding is not just a fad. It's also putting people's lives at risk.
Yeah. So people have to have good tools and get good messages around that.
And hopefully training and hopefully just growing their experiences over time. Not everybody's going to have access to our financial capability to seek out professional training, but hopefully they can find responsible sources of information online, on YouTube, things like that.
Yeah.
They can learn what they need over time, upgrade what they need over time, and not just think that, hey, my Outback is a super effective vehicle, and then just immediately go get it stuck the first time they use it.
And you've done a good job through Outside and Definitely Wild and your own efforts of communicating that message. What are the other opportunities as an industry that we can take advantage of to help improve that?
I would love to see the vehicle manufacturers get on board. They're spending millions of dollars conquesting buyers into a level of off-road capability that's never existed before, that those buyers have never had before. And then they're not at the same time, they're intercepting with a purchase message and a lifestyle message, and then not intercepting with a safety message.
Yeah.
And so not to pick on Subaru too much, because all the OEs are guilty of this, but just because it's in my mind, we just talked about it. But the new Outback Wilderness, new Forester Wilderness are great examples of what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Increased capability.
So a little bit, not a whole lot of increased capability, but a whole lot of image. So people are going to try to use them in more significant ways. And then they have the suggestion of like recovery points, for example. So they've covered their tow hook eyelets in little bronze covers. At no point in the buying process are you intercepted with a message that, hey, what lies behind that bronze cover is not a real recovery point. You cannot pull a car out of mud using that. You will die. Yeah. It's just hey, this is a super sick off-road Subaru.
Right.
And so you'd be forgiven to go off-road and say Death Valley, for instance, get your car stuck, not have a whole lot of experience outdoors, not have a whole lot of appropriate safety messages, try to walk out for help and die, as two people did last year.
And it happens all the time.
It happens all the time. Everybody in the industry saw the pictures last week of the guy in the Super Duty. He tried to recover off a tow ball. He killed himself right in front of his two little toddlers in the back seat and car seats. And that's super sad. And that didn't have to happen.
Well, and that's a really important message that you're sharing, that we need to be thinking about not only does our truck work and does it look cool and all those things that are totally normal human behaviors, but how do we do that safely? And how do we make sure that the people that are with us are being safe as well? So
all of that, it's messaging and it's training. And, again, the OEs have the biggest budgets in the world of any advertiser. And it'd be so refreshing to see them tackle some of these issues alongside selling cars. I think their consumers would be happier. I think they would feel more empowered and they get more out of the car and feel more loyal to the brand if they have these empowering messages of how to use the vehicle safely and capably.
And one of the things that I've also noticed in the time that I've been following your career is that you've done a lot of backpacking, you've done a lot of backcountry activities, and it seems that you've been able to maintain most of that ethos in your vehicle projects as well. So, as a backpacker, every ounce counts. And if I look at your Ranger that we drove in today, everything is very intentional. So the first question is, why a Ranger?
That's a good question. My question back to you is, why doesn't everybody drive a Ranger? And part of that's the issue. The overall issue we're talking about here is that there's not a lot of good information coming out of the industry that's consumer facing. So you look at you and I, we have very small channels. As successful as we are in the grand scheme of things, Overland Journal, Outside, whatever else I do is relatively small in comparison to the megaphone held by original equipment manufacturers, the car companies, the big car magazines, the buff books, TV shows, all that kind of thing. Those are the guys that reach, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people. And, we're reaching people that are already engaged, are already prepared to accept a safety message, that kind of thing, have some experience. The Ranger, depending on how you option it, has a 1,600 pound to 2,100 pound payload. Two-door, two-wheel drive on LTs, you get 2,100 pounds. That is 200 pounds more than the highest payload you can possibly get out of any spec of the new Tundra, right? Which is a class up. That's up there with full-size trucks. And so my four-door 4x4 is 1,600 pounds. And that means, because I use it to take my wife and I camping and our dogs, two of us weigh 300 pounds. My dogs weigh 300 pounds. I can throw on 300 pounds of protective gear and still have, that's 900. So I've still got 700 pounds to work with
for a go
from
fast
there,
and everything else.
For a go fast for everything else, for beers, for steaks, all that kind of stuff. Everything on the Ranger is built up to that weight rating. So it's payload isn't just this weird term that's out there in the universe. It's every bolt, it's every nut, it's the size of the brakes, it's the capacity of the cooling system, it's the transmission's, ability to withstand stress. It's everything. Payload, if we come up with any way to define the work a truck can perform, the way to express that is payload.
Yeah, for sure. And the counter to that is usually that there's some suffering with ride quality, but I haven't found that to be the case with the Ranger. The Ranger has maintained pretty good ride quality.
I've got a $5,000 complete Old Man Emo BP51 system on mine, which is extraordinarily good.
Even stock, it's pretty good.
Even stock, it's not bad. It's one of the beef I have with mainstream car magazines. Again, like my background, I was the first ever road test editor at Jalopnik. I've written for all the Buff books. All I ever wanted from all Teenage Wes ever wanted was to be a road test editor at a car magazine.
Yeah.
I did it at the highest level. I left that world behind. So I still have some beef with that world. The information that comes out is poor. So like they go test drive a Ranger or Tacoma or, anything. They're mostly driving it on a launch because no car journalist that I know actually goes camping. It's super frustrating. They're driving it solo or maybe with a camera person on board with no weight in the bed. And you don't buy a pickup truck to drive solo with no weight in the bed. You might buy a Jeep to do that, two-door Jeep to do that. You might buy a Maverick to do that. You might buy a Subaru Crosstrek to do that. But you buy a pickup truck because you can carry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so people complaining about ride quality when there's nothing in the bed is just such a non-real world use case ever. These people are just so out. They just have no idea how consumers actually use vehicles. Mm-hmm. And so, the stock Ranger ride's fine. Throw some camping gear in the back, throw your dogs in it. It's designed to carry weight. That's
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we have tons of sandbag, these like heavy duty canvas sandbags we can load up. And we know exactly how much each one weigh. They're the same. And we just load them up in the back so we can get a sense for that.
Yeah, I would love to see that at a mainstream car magazine where they had a consistent test methodology, tested everything, in a really transparent and equal way that was also based on real world use.
Mm-hmm. No, that's excellent. And then I've noticed on your Ranger that you've been very intentional about how you've built it because this is actually your second Ranger.
Yes. So
talk to me about what you did for modifications to this truck.
So the first Ranger, I got one of the first when the Ranger came to America. Actually, I should back up a second. Let me tell you a story. So a few years ago, Matt Glass, Fred Williams, Chris, not Cortez, other Chris.
Collard,
and I all drove across the Simpson Desert together.
Right.
We took 8 total vehicles. We had a bunch of Australians with us too. That's a story from another time.
Is that the flooding? When
that huge flooding happened. It was. You
guys were running out of toilet paper?
Oh, we ran out of everything. It was horrible. It was a very challenging trip. I actually got washed downriver in a GQ patrol for a couple hundred yards. I thought I was going to die, but
that sounds perfect.
We took 8 vehicles. Every single one of them broke several dozen times. No exaggeration. The FJ40 we had to tow out with a Defender for like 3,000 miles. This was a big trip. And the one vehicle in the entire trip that a bolt never came loose, never even got close to being stuck, just never had an issue. The guy who ran ARB was driving it. He just sat there and sat in the air conditioning while we fixed cars on the side of the road and made fun of us. Was the Ranger. When those come to America, I'm buying one of those. And I called my friend Mike, who runs Ford Communications, and told him that. And he was like, well, A, it's coming, and B, you're not buying it. And so he sent me one of the first ones off the production line. And it was great. My wife and I took it to our wedding in Baja Sur. Back, we modified it extensively for that trip, but we modified it in a way that was, right at the very beginning of its production run. There were very few parts available. We just had to go with what was out there.
Sure.
Icon had a suspension system for it, but they had no rear springs, so it sagged. Didn't have a front bumper that I was crash tested that I was happy with. Stuff like that compromises. Sure. I had the first ever Go Fast camper made for the Ranger. It was 2 inches too tall and probably cost me 5 miles per gallon,
right.
Kind of thing. When it was time for that car to back to Ford, I looked at the whole car market and there's nothing else that's small enough to be useful off-road that has this high of a payload. I want independent front suspension because I do thousands of miles of on-road driving for every couple hundred miles I get off-road. Mm-hmm. I wanted good road manners. I wanted fuel efficiency. I wanted a pickup I could use for day-to-day just as off-road. So the Jeep wasn't considered. It's a very good product if all you're doing is off-road, but it is not a great on-road vehicle. So I bought a second one, and I learned from the experiences that I learned from the first one, the compromises that I made, and I resolved to do it right. I got this one really right.
It's nice.
It's one of the best cars I've ever driven. I'm super happy with it. Again, I chose this car because of my experience in Australia, so I tried to apply the program of Australian vehicle modification to it. Readers, if you're not aware, Australia actually regulates its 4x4 industry through a series of rules called the Australian design rules. It's tire size, it's suspension lift, all this kind of stuff to make sure people's vehicles are safe and reliable and functional as they travel the outback, right? And so I try to use as many Australian parts as possible. And where I wasn't able to use those, I used American parts. So again, full Olma Nemo BB51 suspension system. I don't think BB51 gets the reputation it deserves in this country. It's actually a consumer product, a consumer fully focused, consumer-ready product that's sold on shelves.
Yeah.
And when a lot of Americans think about suspension, they go and get some like incredibly elaborate custom setup, or they just buy something from some guy who's like, well, your vehicle weighs how much? Okay, here's your springs.
Yeah.
Whereas in contrast, what I mean by consumer level product is, engineers from ARB have done thousands of miles, not just on the suspension itself, but on every possible application. So if they certify it for the Ranger, that means somebody's actually driven around the Outback, driven around Australia a couple times, changing, valve rates and, shim stacks and things like that to make sure it's dialed.
Yeah. And these are internal bypass shocks, which most are not.
Yes, quadruple internal bypass shocks that are adjustable for both compression and rebound damping, which most are not. At a relatively affordable price point because they're mass manufactured and with long service intervals, and they stand up to weather. The BB51 I have, my wife's Land Cruiser, has been through 3 winters now, and it looks like it's brand new.
Yeah, sure.
And you could not say the same thing if it was Kings or Fox or something like that. So
they don't have the corrosion testing.
No, they don't. And BB51, OME, ARB actually does this. They dunk it in salt water. They run it past government tests. They make sure it's not going to roll over in a lane change maneuver. All that stuff that you actually really want as a consumer, that's really important, they do. And there's not really another brand that does.
Especially not from that perspective. What I've noticed is that these are premium performance shock absorbers that are designed for daily drivers.
Yes, quadruple internal bypass, remote reservoir shocks that work just as well driving around downtown Bozeman.
And they don't rattle. They don't make a bunch of noise.
They don't squeak.
So that's the reason why I run them.
Yeah, and they spec it out for the weight of the vehicle too. So it's not like you go and do, a custom shop and you're like, hey, my vehicle weighs whatever. OME has sitting on dealer shelves, light duty, medium duty, and heavy duty setups. And you just look at the weight of the springs and you choose what's appropriate for you. And
you can see it on your truck. It works great.
It works great. And so in addition to that, just continuing to talk about ARB, I have an ARB front bumper. Front bumpers are another great example of how Australia does products at a level that we just don't. ARB crash tests Rangers with ARB bumpers in full-on crash tests with slow motion cameras to comply with government regulations in Australia. You compare that to like any of the popular bumpers here, and it's just like some meth heads in Idaho, like welding some metal hoops together. It might be enough to shed a deer, but it's not enough to guarantee that your airbag is going to fire at the exact right moment in a real crash, which ARB is guaranteeing. Yeah. And that's important. We need to build safe vehicles.
Yeah. That's why we did that test years ago. Chris Collard ran it, and we actually, had a light measuring. It's a huge dome, where they actually gather all of the light. And they did not always line up with the manufacturer's specification.
Right. We could talk about this for hours. I'm obsessed with lights, but it's just, again, buying products from a country that regulates how things are made and make sure those things are effective and safe and high quality and useful is so much more important than buying them from, so much more effective for your use than buying them from a place that doesn't regulate stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And it's frustrating.
And a special thanks to Onyx Off-Road for helping to support this week's podcast. Going further on your adventures is about having the right tools. The Onyx Off-Road app's intuitive maps make it easy to find trails and disperse camping, and their offline maps give you full GPS navigation capability without cell coverage. I'm also really excited about their new route builder for planning and sharing custom trips. It's got a snap to trail tool where you can just drop points where you want to go and a route automatically connects to the closest road or trail. You can build, save, and add routes to folders and share your entire trip with your buddies. You can find out more information on onxmaps.com. You can also find their apps in the Apple Store or whatever other device that you use. Thanks again, Onyx. So what did you do for self-recovery? You have a winch on the truck?
Yeah, I've got a Warn. Wouldn't run anything but Warn. They make everything right here in America. I think they have a Chinese line now, but it's still certified to American safety stuff and covered by the same warranties. I think it's a 10,000 pounds with a synthetic line. I use it once a year, usually for some idiot who is unprepared.
You're recovering somebody else. Yeah. But they're blocking your way home.
Yeah,
you got to help them out.
I can't get off until I winch, so I got to help them. One of my most comical uses of winch was I was driving down by the campus here in Bozeman, and a food truck was high centered at a curb. And I was totally prepared just to drive past and not deal with it. And then I saw a cop pop his trunk and pull out a ratchet strap. And I was like, oh God, I can't drive past this. I can't drive past this. Yeah. And again, like just the majority of American consumers don't understand vehicle recovery, and it actually kills people. And using real products is super important.
Like we just talked about a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Putting a toe strap around a tow ball, it's enough to kill somebody.
It is, and it's sad. And it happens so fast. It turns an everyday thing that you and I do without thinking now, because we've done it so often, into something that actually kills dads. And like, that sucks.
Yeah.
And all it takes is just an effective safety message where like, I wish that it was just regulated in some way where like, it doesn't matter how stupid you are, you can't buy the wrong product.
Yeah.
And it's a shame it's not that way.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Make that important part of messaging. So then in the back, you've got a Go Fast.
Yes, I've got a Go Fast camper, which I love.
It's impressive. I mean, looking at the one on your truck to see that it's not just an evolution from Gen 1 to Gen 2. It's definitely a revolutionary product. It's
insane. I mean, so I took Scott by the factory today. Full disclosure, I work with the guys at Go Fast now. Take all this with a grain of salt. I wouldn't, if anybody who knows me has read my stuff for the last 20 years from now, I would never not speak the truth. But, I should say that I do work with those guys now. So it is a level of product that it does not exist elsewhere. All of the hardware on it is machined from built aluminum by robots, which is really impressive.
Yeah, we watched that today. That was really impressive.
So that can take all the different sort of force vectors and then push those force vectors through the aluminum extrusions in ways that aluminum extrusion can handle. Aluminum extrusion is very good at handling straight forces, not bending forces. We've got a topper coming out in the next couple of weeks that we just threw 4,000 pounds of weight on the top of, and it was fine. We could sell that product to consumer tomorrow. They would never know we had thrown 4,000 pounds of weight on the top, and that was sized for a Tacoma.
Yeah, sure.
So
perfect for a Tacoma.
Yeah, I mean, it would if we had actually put 4,000, the camper sat on the ground during that because we actually put it on a Tacoma, it would have bent the frame.
Sure.
It's just there's a level of quality and insightful design and intelligent product there that it's just not evident anywhere else. And it's also appropriate for the way that I enjoy the outdoors, because I go outdoors to be outdoors. I enjoy ultralight backpacking. If I camp on a beach, I want to feel the fog in the morning, kind of thing. And it's that level of product, which I really enjoy. It's not, I like your Scout camper. I understand its appeal. There's times when I feel like I could use one, but I want to be outdoors.
Yeah, sure.
I want to camp. I want to cook under my awning.
Sure.
While it's pouring rain in a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
I want to climb inside during high winds and, feel the wind a little bit, feel like I'm outdoors.
Yeah.
And the GFC gives me enough to be very comfortable. My wife and I had our honeymoon in one with all 3 dogs and had a great time. But it's still a level of product where I feel like I'm outdoors. Yeah. I feel like I'm camping. I don't really like trailers and RVs and campers because
if you're not living out of it, you don't really need to do it.
I already have a really nice house.
Yeah. Exactly. I wasn't spending 2 months out of it, but I agree. Yeah. I agree. And I think the overall execution of that truck is really effective. It's not very often we get to talk about people's wives' vehicles, but her truck is sweet. Tell me about the 200.
I should back up a little bit here. Sorry to back up all the time. I was a car journalist for a long time. I did it at the highest level. I've been very successful in my career. I can, within a reason, not quite Matt Scott levels of ridiculousness, but I can own any car that I want.
Yeah.
Right. The best car, the best vehicle that I've ever driven for my uses is the custom Toyota Land Cruiser that my wife drives.
Yeah, sure.
The second best vehicle that I've ever driven is my Ranger. And I feel really privileged to be able to say that. Like I wouldn't trade those 2 vehicles for anything. I wouldn't trade them for a Ferrari. I wouldn't trade them for a G-Wagon. And so what I did my wife's Land Cruiser, again, we live here in Montana. Weather can change really fast. There's no effective weather forecasts. You just never know what you're going to get. I wanted to make sure she felt super empowered to go outdoors without me with her friends and feel like she was safe and that she could push the limits a little bit and go places she hadn't seen before. And I wanted to know she was safe. And I built her the best Land Cruiser. We took advantage of the products that are out there for that very, that global, well-supported platform. And we didn't build it past the point of reasonable, which a lot of people do. There's nothing on the roof. There's no roof rack. There's no 500-pound tent.
Right.
What we did was I long traveled it with OE parts off a 2nd-gen Tundra, creates a plus 1.5 situation every side, and a little over 12 inches of total wheel travel up front. So that's as much as like a brand new like Jeep Wrangler Rubicon or Ford Bronco Sasquatch level of like articulation. from something that fits in the stock fenders and the stock wheels on 33s.
And did you retain the KDSS?
Oh, yeah. KDSS is what makes the 200 Series Land Cruiser a 200 Series Land Cruiser, and it's really
so that's
frustrating.
Interesting that it can be retained with those longer travel.
Yeah, it bolts right up. All we had to change was the lower control arms, upper control arms, CVs, and tie rod ends.
Right.
And so everything just bolts right up to the KDSS.
Nice.
And it's incredible because, we can drive it somewhere. It's Montana. There's 3 cops. All 3 have written me speeding tickets. You know what I mean?
There was a period of time where Montana didn't have a speed limit.
Yeah.
Which I think is amazing.
The speeding tickets here are like $20. So they're like, hey man, you're going pretty fast. You're like, I know, if you checked out my truck, they're like, dude, it's sweet. That's the interaction. Right. Sure. So I drive everywhere at 100 miles an hour. Her truck can corner totally flat on pavement at 100 miles an hour, like a Bentley.
Yeah.
And then the second you go on a dirt road and KDSS works, it's a hydraulic system, and it just sort of automatically, if both axles are being pushed in the same direction, the sway bars are connected. Mm-hmm. And the second the axles move differently, the sway bars are disconnected. And so you drive down a dirt road and you can imagine you hit a pothole and the rear axle falls into it, and the rear axle falls into it without a sway bar disconnected. Yeah. And there's no time for an actuator or anything like that happening. Disconnected, it just doesn't have the sway bar. And so you can drive down like a rough dirt road like we drive down every single day. With all the extra travel, from the long travel situation. There's roads here that we take at like 85 miles an hour in her Land Cruiser that like locals drive down at like 25 miles an hour, like complaining.
Sure.
It's ridiculous. Virginia like goes on a camping trip with our friends and people are like creeping along in 4 low and she just like steamrolls through at like 55 miles an hour with like her arm, like, her axles just doing this and she has no idea that it's happening. Right. She's just driving along going, why is everybody complaining? This is not hard. She's just retaining traction everywhere because her wheels are just in contact with the ground no matter what she hits.
Yeah, sure.
And that vehicle is just extraordinarily good. Yeah. It manages traction really well, with the full time. It's got Torsen center diff. So it's always running an all-wheel drive. Yeah. We took it out for a video shoot where I was trying to demonstrate its 4x4 capabilities for outside. And, video shoots are complicated, dynamic things. I'm shouting at my cameraman. We're trying to figure out sound, redoing obstacles. And I realized like halfway through the day, I'd never put it in 4-wheel drive.
Driving around in all-wheel drive.
I was just driving around in all-wheel drive and it was fine. You could see the wheels spinning up a little bit, but it made it through every obstacle.
Yeah, sure.
Except Torsen just puts the power where it's needed.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And there's just a level of spec on that truck that will probably never be recreated again.
It's not likely. Although electric can achieve a lot of it, but not with that same level of around the world capability.
We're not seeing articulation from the electric trucks yet.
No, not yet.
But that form factor frees up a lot of things. Never say never, but we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
We're not seeing traction handled to the same degree as like, a triple lock situation.
Sure.
We're not seeing,
tires
in a place where they're happy. The Rivian is on street tires.
Yeah, like a 32. Basically. Yeah, because they have to get the range.
Just street tires. And the Hummer's on mud terrains. But, again, that's a 6-figure truck. It
is. On your Land Cruiser, you have front and rear lockers in that?
Rear locker.
Rear locker?
Yeah.
And then you've got what size tire?
It's a 33. It's a 275/70 18.
Nice.
Which, again, I didn't have to re-gear it.
Yeah, sure.
With that new 8-speed they put in it.
Awesome.
It's got an ARB front compressor. So you got to take off on the grill so you can air up and down her tires super easy.
Perfect. That's amazing.
We have that. We have ARB front bumper, again, safest bumper in the world. Sliders from Slee, which are just super strong. ARB rear bumper without a swing out, which I mostly just did because it's an expensive vehicle.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't like the idea of people running into it.
Makes them pay attention.
Exactly. People have hit it. Yeah. I went through a car wash with their car last year. Some dude in a brand new Explorer confused like park neutral drive and rammed me in the middle of the car wash. I didn't understand what had happened. I was sitting there in the car wash and all of a sudden the car wash shut off and I didn't feel anything. And like all the guys were laughing and they were like, come on, drive out. And I drove out and they're like, yeah, that guy's car is and some dude in an Explorer had like ran into the back of me, like torn off his front bumper, like scooched up his hood. There was like a nick, like a half an inch wide in the steel bumper that like I touched up with nail polish. The level of capability and reassurance that car provides just our everyday life, whether it's just driving around town in the Bozeman, like at the car wash. Yeah. Or just an unexpected snowstorm, or it's off-road and a river is a little higher than you thought it was. There's a little more mud than you thought there was be. That car will handle it. It'll handle it for everybody. It's got a Warren Xeon 12S in the front. There's nothing it can't do.
Well, and if you wanted to drive it down to Panama tomorrow,
we would just put the dogs inside and go.
Exactly.
I
pack some bags and off you go.
One of my favorite things I should never fail to manage, because it's literally my favorite thing in the whole truck beyond the suspension, is a long range American fuel tank. And so it's 12 and a half extra gallons, which at 12 miles per gallon is useful. And it hides up in the frame voids. It's formed up into the voids of the frame above the spare. So you can retain the spare in the stock location, not lose any height. The spare does not hang any lower.
Interesting.
And you just get 12 and a half extra gallons on board. And so my wife, weighs 100 pounds. Her fussing with a jerry can is just going to be a nightmare.
Sure.
And I'm going to hear about it. And so instead of having a jerry can, she has 2.5 jerry cans, and all she does is push a button.
Yeah,
and they pump right into the main tank, and we get 50% more range.
Yeah, that's awesome. With your broad spectrum of outdoor, experiences and skill and research and editorial, what do you consider to be the fundamental skills of outdoormanship that you would talk to people about? What do people need to be thinking about when they go outdoors?
I think people focus a lot on really silly stuff. Like I have friends that want to be more outdoorsy, and they go and attend like a Knowles class. They try to learn everything. Honestly, just a sense of adventure, the ability to, effectively evaluate risks and to make smart decisions. And just go out there and do it. I don't think there's a whole lot of skill or knowledge or things like that. You'll learn it. We all learned it. Made a lot of mistakes.
Maybe starting with manageable risk.
Yeah. Start with stuff you can do. Just go car camping.
Gain the experience. And then
if it's
going.
cold and your sleeping bag doesn't work, get a better sleeping bag.
Yeah.
Read a couple of online stuff on Expedition Portal about recovery gear. Make sure you pack the right stuff. Watch a couple of YouTube videos on how to use it.
Yeah.
And there you go. First aid is first aid. You put a Band-Aid on it. It's about the extent of what you do.
Yeah.
Try not to cut yourself with a knife while you're cooking food.
Yeah. And that happens more often.
Yeah.
Than it's amazing.
It does happen. The big thing is just try to be a good citizen, dispose of your poop properly. Don't litter, things like that. You'll be fine. If you make a mistake, you're going to learn from it, and you'll be more fine next time because you made a mistake.
Yeah, Wes, I think that's one of the biggest struggles that our industry has now is the number of people that are out overlanding. The amount of trash. I don't think overlanders leave trash. They don't leave much, but they definitely leave a lot of human waste behind.
As a dog owner, the amount of human poop that is out there, it's not hard to poop appropriately. Carry a shovel, dig a hole. That hole should be 6 to 8 inches deep. Put poop in it and pee in it. Nothing else.
Yeah.
Throw your toilet paper in a trash bag and carry it out.
Yeah.
There you go. You pooped outdoors. Congratulations.
Yeah. Exactly.
Why is that hard?
And if you have the capability, like I do in the Scout, I have a composting toilet in there, then you don't even have to leave anything in the outdoors.
Great. Yeah, I'm going to get one of those new Japanese toilets that seals everything in a heat sealed wag bag for you.
Clever.
And I don't need to do that again. I don't camp where other people camp. I go way further than other people. I just feel that I've encountered so much human poop that I want to take my situation at least to the next level. So I'm setting a good example.
That's why I'm doing it. I just want to minimize that's even happening. But if you look at Moab last year, they shut down camping because they had 3.2 million people, and it was literally the human waste. It was too much.
It's awful. And it's not that hard to deal with poop.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. You know what? Plan ahead. If you're going to go out for a weekend, poop on Friday before you take off. Yeah. You probably won't need to poop again until Sunday when you're back at McDonald's.
Or at least think about the people that are going to come to that campsite after you. Pick up after yourself. Don't leave poop everywhere.
Plan to visit that campsite again. Would you want to come back to that campsite if somebody had diarrhea all over it?
Yeah, exactly.
And that happens.
It totally does. So one of the things that we do like to ask is all this experience that you've had, being automotive journalists, traveling around the world, building vehicles, backpacking, hunting. How has all of those experiences changed you as a person? What are the things about you that you realize that experience has really shifted in your mindset?
To answer your question about what this has given me, it's just I just want to help people. Yeah, I want other people to I want people to listen to this and feel like they are more empowered to go outdoors. I want people to read my stuff and feel like they're more empowered to go outdoors. Just be full of love and care about other people and do everything. If all of us just do everything we can to help each other, then we all win. Yeah, it gets easier. Gets easier for everybody. All the work that I've done to help other people that have less than I have, all the work that I've ever done to stand up for what's right, all the politics I've ever done, everything has made me richer, not poorer. Yeah. And I don't understand why everybody doesn't do it. It's been an overwhelming victory for me, and it will be an overwhelming victory for anybody else who puts themselves out there in the same way. Well, that's inspirational, man. Thanks for the work that you're doing with that. That's really amazing.
Another question that I like to ask, which is usually a selfish one, is the books that have made a difference in your life. The books that you're like, man, that was an amazing read.
Back in Georgia, I had this incredible opportunity to be mentored. I was a very little kid at the time by this guy named Mark Warren. And Mark Warren is a member of the Cherokee tribe, a prolific outdoor educator. So he has a series of survival books that are available on Amazon. I lived with this guy for a summer, learned how to swim whitewater from him, learn how to catch snakes from him, learn how to build shelter from him. You can learn all of that from this and learn how to eat native plants from him. All of that same stuff is available in books, Mark Warren on Amazon. And he's also written a really incredible trilogy about the history of Wyatt Earp, where he collaborated with the Earp family. Wow. And has written probably the first true history, as much as they understand it to be true, about this larger than life, Wild West figure. So he's incredible. And then the other guy that I really love is Robert Young Pelton.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Have you met Pelton?
Oh, a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So
he's the real deal.
Yeah, Pelton's my hero. And I sent him an email like 10 years ago. And I was like, hey, man, can I buy you a drink sometime? He wrote right back. He's like, sure. So we went out for drinks. He made sure that I paid.
Yeah. Fair enough.
We got hammered.
Fair enough.
We became friends.
Yeah.
Now we go on camping trips together. Yeah. He's a great dude. And he's just super interesting. He's one of those guys that the world's just never been scary to him.
No.
He'll visit a war zone. He'll go anywhere. And he's just like, hey, man, I'm Robert. And people are like, that's cool. You want to be friends? And that's a great way to be.
The story of him going into Iraq, just as the war is kind of at its peak, he buys one of Saddam Hussein's Rolls Royces for like $2,000 in cash, and he drives it. He drives it across the country. Yeah. It's an unbelievable story.
He's ridiculous.
Yeah,
we went on a camping trip.
Didn't he write The World's Most Dangerous Places?
Yes.
Something like that.
That's what he's famous for.
Yeah, sure.
So he had a TV series in the 90s that was on like CBS or something. Yeah. We went camping in Anza Borrego with the latest Gen 4 Raptor when it first came out. And somebody got super upset that Wiley here was off leash. And Robert's like 7 feet tall. And so he's like screaming in my face. I don't know how to navigate it.
Yeah.
And so Robert just comes over and he's like, hey, man. And the guy like looks up at Robert. He's like, oh, no.
Well, you're not a small guy either. He is an amazing character. So, anybody that's listening to check out Robert Young Pelton's work is really awesome. Last question. Somebody's brand new to overlanding. Couple pieces of advice that you'd give them.
Just go out there and have fun, man. Subscribe to Ronnie Dahl on YouTube.
He's a character.
He's a character. He's really good advice.
Yeah.
Watch some of his recovery advice. Grab a snatch strap, two shackles, 2 3/4-inch Crosby shackles. Make sure your car's recovery points. Set of max tracks. And that's about it. Make sure you air down. Make sure you poop in a hole. And just go have a trip.
Yeah.
Just go do it. And try not to be super irresponsible. Try to scale your experiences over time. Experience will teach you how to scale. But you have to get out there. I see so many people that just don't appreciate just how much is there. Like how much people that live here in Bozeman have no idea how accessible and crazy beautiful most of this state is. And you can't get to any of it without a 4x4.
Yeah.
People want to be all purist about backpack that. And I do all that stuff. I do all the human powered stuff. And you can't get to any of it that's worth a damn without a 4x4.
Yeah. So or at least not without a whole bunch of effort.
Whole lot of days of walking.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm not toting a kayak for 15 miles up into those mountains right there, but I could drive there in about 10 minutes.
I know. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is amazing. Well, Wes, the work that you do for outside and your own outlets has always been inspirational to me. I think the quality of the editorial that you produce is exceptional. You've always put the reader first, and that's something that we always try to celebrate within our organization. How do people find out more about you and the work that you do? Just Google my name, Wes Siler. Mostly write for Outside Magazine. I have a couple other projects. You'll find me. You probably read my stuff already. You don't even realize that. It's, I'm very fortunate to be able to say that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And that's very flattering. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. Wes, thanks so much for being on the podcast. We'll talk to you all next time.